I have a poem in here that is about my dog, Jessie. This is not an earth shattering poem, it's just about my dog, Jessie, who we had to put down. Um, Jessie, my dog. I was driving back from a music recital this evening and found myself cruising down a street I used to frequent 30 years ago, but haven't driven down since. So many of the places I used to go to are gone. A favorite Italian restaurant, now a fitness center. A bookstore, now an antique store. A cafe where I read most of 100 Years of Solitude, now an ice cream parlor. It isn't as if I was planning to go to any of those places, but it makes me sad to know they're gone. It doesn't really matter. I'm 72 years old. A lot is gone. It's all going to go eventually. By the cafe, a boy was walking his dog along the sidewalk. One day the boy will be gone, along with his dog. My dog is gone. Jessie used to lie by my feet as I sat at the computer trying to write a poem. She's gone now. No more Jessie. After I'd written the poem, I'd take Jessie out for her midnight walk. Sometimes we'd pass a house and the people inside might still be up, sitting at the table, talking and drinking. But mostly the streets were quiet, and she and I would enjoy the night air, the way the leaves rustled when a wind came up from the ocean. Maybe a poem would be buried in someone's front yard, and Jessie would dig it up and bring it to me, like a bone she'd just found. That poem about the man in charge of watering, Jessie dug that one up. She just dug it up and brought it to me. What you got there, girl? She dropped it on the sidewalk, then trotted off, looking for more poems, more bones. No more bones now. And few poems to be dug up except this one, which is torn at the edges, and I've stopped caring about the line breaks or the metaphors or even the kind of things a poet is supposed to do when writing a poem, making everything ship shape. No more bones, no more ship shape. I'm not even sure you are reading this poem right now. Maybe no one is reading it. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter, you know? I write the poems anyway. Jessie will come back some night, take my poems on our walk, and bury them in someone's front yard. And all I'll have to do in my remaining years is walk my weary bones down the sidewalk and dig them up. Dig up those poems that Jessie buried. My good girl, dog, taking such good care of me then and now. Jessie won't be with me, but I'll thank her, give her a good rub on the back, then I'll let her go. So that's about my dog, Jessie.
That's beautiful.
So it's not so much rhythm as the voice. You know, sometimes there are rhythmic things you can do, and that's part of your technique. So it depends. If I'm doing to be read and sung, the repetition, then I would do that. You know.
It's also about loss and change. You know, you
You mean
talked
that?
about walking down the street and this restaurant isn't here anymore and this bookstore has changed.
Well,
And
it's about. I'm 70. I wrote that when I was 72. I'm 78 now, so I wrote that 6 years ago. It's about thinking. As I said, my dad died when he was 54, and I always thought I would live longer than he did. So, when I wrote the poem, I was 72, and I'm feeling older. Your bones, your body, you don't, I can't dunk anymore. I can't throw a football 70 yards. And so you also think of what you can't do as an artist, that you're getting older and things are going to be gone. You're going to lose things. Friends will die and loved ones will leave. And I was just thinking about that and feeling all that. And that Jessie was gone, but I thought of how she would bury my poems and then dig them up, which is a metaphor, of course. Um, and that eventually I'd pet her and let her go. That at some point the poems don't come anymore. And the muse that brings you the poems, whether it's your dog or the muse or whatever, that will end too. And you have to let it go. You have to give them a pet and let it go. Whether it's a poem or a lover, a loved one, friend, whatever.
In the history of our family, when we think of defining moments, there's one moment that stands above all the others. And it was the moment when our son Peter, as a 5.5-year-old little boy, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And our pediatrician put the MRI films in our hands and said, you need to drive to UCLA Medical Center. A brain surgeon will be waiting for you, and he'll explain everything. And so Kathy and I got in the car, and the doctor said, don't stop anywhere on the way. So we put our son in the car, drove to the ER, and as we turned into the entrance to the ER, we looked at each other, and I think Kathy was the one who said, in this moment, like, our lives are changing forever. And that was true. We now in our family talk about the moment before Peter got sick, and we talk about the moment after Peter's brain tumor. My daughter's life experience was different from that moment on. Her best friend and brother suddenly was out of her life and in the hospital, and she wasn't seeing him. And when she did finally see him after surgery, he was changed. The tumor was gone, but he didn't speak, didn't walk. He looked to her like a monster. And for Peter, that was a defining moment. It was a moment that crippled him, that made him, and Peter, many years later, is alive. But as a result of the surgery, radiation, which isn't good for little boys' brains, and chemotherapy, he's kind of a real life Forrest Gump, pure of heart, and he knows what love is, and he struggles intellectually. So that was a moment of wounding for him. It was the beginning of the death of the dreams that we had for him. We had to find new dreams to replace the ones that died. And it took a long time, though. We were the ones who were dragged kicking and screaming to recognizing the dreams that were not going to happen now for him. Even as we approached his 16th birthday, and people his age were going to get driver's licenses, none of us wants to live in a world where Peter Riley has a driver's license, because he just cannot process all of the information fast enough. And he would get it right 95% of the time, but that's not enough on the streets of LA. And so I had to eventually say to him, Peter, you're not going to get a driver's license. And so he's found a new dream. He heard about the Google car. And so he's all about a self-driving car. As soon as he can get one, he wants a car that's going to take him wherever it can take him. We had to absorb a lot of losses. But a day came when Peter had struggled along in school, got to high school, and in California, there's a test you have to pass in order to get a diploma called the California High School Exit Exam. It's a standardized test. So no matter how much people at the school loved him and helped him, there was no way he was going to get a diploma if he didn't pass this test. And I remember the day that the results came in the mail, and I just heard Kathy screaming in the other part of the house. She'd opened the envelope, and he had passed by like a whisker. And so we got to go to his high school graduation. And I'd been in high school, and I know how it works. People applaud based on how popular you are when your name is called. And so my family had all come to his graduation, and I was telling everybody, you've got to like cheer your brains out because we have to be as loud as possible. And Kathy was just saying, oh, I don't care about that. I just hope he doesn't fall off the stage. And they called his name, and the entire senior class came to their feet applauding because they all recognized what he had overcome in order to earn that diploma.
How old was your dad when he found out he had terminal cancer?
48. I think he was 48, if memory serves. Yeah, I think he was around 48. And he got diagnosed with renal cell carcinoma, which is a kidney cancer. They removed a softball-sized tumor off of his kidney. He was a vegetarian, didn't drink, didn't smoke, had a pretty healthy lifestyle, but had just gotten out of a really bad multi-year lawsuit that caused a lot of stress, which probably helped out a lot, I'm sure. But yeah, it was at the time they had given him 8 months. And so we pushed up our wedding and everything. He ended up lasting 8 years. So he was a fighter, for sure. He definitely fought tooth and nail. And so ended up lasting about 8 years on it, which was great.
And where were you when you found out?
It's funny, I actually remember exactly where I was. I was working at the Video Superstore in Orlando, Florida. And he called while I was on a shift, and I remember going out and sitting in the car on my lunch break, I think. And he told me about it. I remember it very vividly. And it was just kind of like, oh, okay. This big hit of what, how do you reevaluate your lifestyle and your life at that point? Because you're kind of like, oh, wow, okay. And it makes you really realize really quickly how sacred life is, for sure. But I remember sitting in my 88 Suburban in that parking lot when he called and told us, and it was like, oh, okay. And then trying to figure out what to do from there.
And when you walked back into the store, did the store look different in a way? Because your perspective, now everything was turned upside down?
I don't know if necessarily my perspective was completely turned upside down. It was more so of, okay, like what do we do next? What's the next step? I'm definitely a very structured kind of person. So it's like, all right, if I have to accomplish something, what do I have to do to get there? Like, okay, what's next? We do surgery next. Okay, we do the surgery to remove the tumor. Okay, then what's after that? Then we start chemotherapy. Okay. So like, what's the plan to get to our goal of remission? So I think my mind was kind of more thinking that way than thinking about, oh, I'm going to go cry for an hour and a half, and be sad. I think it was more so about, okay, here we are. What do we have to do to accomplish our goal to make this work, to make this better? Which of course you only have so much say in because it's a disease. But and then they started the processes, and you stuck around for another 8 years. It was crazy. It was cool.
How did that day impact his life, and how did that day impact yours?
He definitely made a lot of choices and changes after that. He moved back to his home state of Louisiana. He got closer to family over there. He ended up meeting a woman, Beth, who they started a relationship, and she had a big farm, and he started a farm, which he never had a farm before. We bought him goats for Christmas, I remember, or sheep and goats, because that was fun. And he started this farm. He was a lawyer and a judge for years, and so he kind of took to this retirement. He would have to go to Houston to do chemotherapy and through the MD Anderson Center. And then after a few of those years, he started traveling, trying to travel to places that he hadn't been to. He tried to kind of live the best he could. He got remarried during that to Beth, and, lived as much as he could possibly do. But it was interesting because at the end, I have two of my sisters, and I went and stayed with them 2 weeks apart. So we each had 2 weeks with them. And I had the last 2 weeks, and I was leaving because our short 222 was playing at Grauman's Chinese Theater here in Hollywood, which was the first time I'd ever had a movie play in Hollywood, let alone at the Chinese Theater. It was a huge, huge deal. And I was there with him for 2 weeks, and then I took a flight to Hollywood. I met my wife. She flew out from Florida. We went to this whole red carpet, had this whole incredible experience, got meetings from studios and all this different stuff. I put her back on a flight the next day because I had set up a few days worth of meetings while I was there. And as soon as she got on the flight and left, I remember going back and I was just hanging out, just looking at the Hollywood sign, soaking everything in. And then I get a call saying he's not going to last the next day. So it was a really crazy experience because it was like the highest and lowest point I think I'd ever experienced in the same time frame. And so I was like, well, okay. And so I went and booked a flight, flew back to the small town in Louisiana that he was in, canceled all my meetings, canceled everything. And yeah, he passed away the next day. And so it was a crazy whirlwind for sure. And what's even crazier is 3 months after that, my stepbrother ended up getting killed by an accidental shooting. And 3 months after that, my wife's mother died of cancer. So it was a very crazy year. And also our son was born right after she passed away. A few months after she passed, he was born. But it really, going back to the whole horror element, it really lit a fire to where it's like, all right, your life is not guaranteed. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. Like, you got to get going. You got to make sure that everything you're doing is impacting the way that you want it to go and to help you reach this goal that you've set for yourself. And so, soon after that, we moved out here and kind of changed the way we were doing things. And it's been great. It's been wonderful. But it's that fire that kind of keeps pushing. Because you never know. And I've had friends that have passed away that are younger than me and stuff. And even during COVID, like, we've had friends pass away from COVID that, just didn't had their whole chance taken from them. And so, like, you see that and it's like, oh my gosh, and then your monster really goes crazy because it doesn't want to die either. And you really kind of got to figure out what's the best plan, to get what you want and where you want to be. And once you decalculate all of that, I feel like you use your secret decoder ring and see how the industry works. And you're kind of like, okay, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. You see what connects the dots. It does make it a little easier. Interesting too, my mother was diagnosed with cancer the month after I was born at 20. And she had Hodgkin's disease, luckily, which is the most curable kind of cancer. But the amount of chemotherapy she went through in 1981 has caused a lot of damage on her body now later in life. So now she's 61 and her heart is completely falling apart. She has a lot of really bad heart problems and her heart's way too damaged for a transplant or anything else like that too. So now you kind of watch that side as well and you're like, okay, you're trying to balance, everything else too with that and how much time you have left with them and what you can do to, and as a child, you're always trying to figure out what you can do to make your parents proud of you, right? So you kind of always have that in mind too, that it's like, okay, well, if she's still here, like, what can you do to be like, hey, look, I just did this thing that, maybe they're impressed by. Though, they don't know about everything. So sometimes it's hard to impress you, like, oh, I got this thing happened. It's like, I don't know what that is. It's like, okay, cool. But I do remember the first time my movie came in a store and I called my dad. And my dad he was very skeptical of everything. And he was skeptical of, like, everyone's skeptical of the film industry when their kids go into it because they don't understand it. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand there's lots of work and you can make lots of money and there's lots of different things about it. It took my wife's parents forever to figure out. I don't know, if they've still figured it out, like what exactly we do and how we survive. But I remember calling my dad and being like, hey, the movie came out today. He's like, oh, okay. And I was like, no, it's at Best Buy. You can go buy it. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, it's on the shelf. Like, you can go to Best Buy and pick it up. And he called me an hour later and he's like, you're not going to believe this. Your movie's at Best Buy. And I'm like, I just told you that. Like, you didn't believe me, I guess. And he was like, I just bought every copy. And I'm like, well, great. I know nobody else can watch it because you bought all the copies. But it's moments like that, you want, of course, you want your parents to be proud of you. And
What else did your dad teach you in his final years?
I think the things I learned most from him in those final years was that life is not guaranteed. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. And seeing him get more and more debilitated and once the cancer spread to his brain and he didn't really understand like who you were all the time or what exactly was going on all the time, I think it was really like, oh man, like you really need to get your life together and figure out how to accomplish your goals. I think in entertainment, people are kind of like, oh, I want to be this, but they never really think about how to be that. They just assume at some point someone calls you and you're like, hey, I saw this short film you did. You're awesome. Do you want to direct the next Avengers movie? Which of course would be amazing, but it doesn't really work that way. So you got to try to figure out how to get to the point that you want. And everyone's point's different. I mean, some people want to go and be a makeup artist on a certain television show, or somebody wants to go and design props for something else. And there's different ways to do everything. There's no right way to do anything in the entertainment industry, but there are consistent ways that people have become successful. So I think one of the things that I've learned those last few years was to really laser focus like exactly what I wanted and then figure out the combination to be able to get to there as fast as I could. He and I didn't always see eye to eye. He was definitely a person that didn't understand a lot. Like he wanted me to play football. I can't play football. I'm like the least athletic person ever. But he played football, so it's like he wanted me to play football. Though he wanted to be a writer and his parents didn't want him to do that. So he had to do what his parents wanted. And luckily he didn't force that on me, but it was just kind of a different mentality. So you always kind of have that, besides the creature living in your back, you have this little nagging thing that always wishes that you had a little bit more time with him, that you could have done something that he would have been impressed by. And for me, my specific one was he was always obsessed with France, with Paris. Like he loves France. He went there in college, like backpacking. Like he always wanted to go back to France. And then 3 months after he died, our short got into the Cannes Film Festival.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, that was it. That was the moment. That's the one I would have had where he would have been like, wow, you actually accomplished something. And, that was taken away. And I never got to have that moment. And I feel like that will be over my head until the day I die, that one nagging thing, which is really unfortunate. But, that's also something that's driving you to work harder and to get there quicker and to make it work, because now I have a son and I can encourage him to do what he wants to do. And he's awesome. So we're literally clones of each other. Like I feel terrible for my wife. She has 2 of us now, but he's amazing. And what the world gives now to kids is incredible, because when I was a kid, I didn't have robotics programs in 3rd grade. Like we didn't have all these awesome programs and website. We didn't have websites or anything to learn from. And he can do anything he wants. Like he built his own robots at 5 years old, and now he's really into molecular biology, which is interesting. He's 11. Obsessed with molecular biology. He loves exploring and science and everything. And it's really, really exciting to go on that journey with him and encourage him to do, whatever he wants. And hopefully, he won't have that moment looming over his head at some point in life that he didn't think he had made his father proud. And so that's something else I learned as a father now to try to work out with my son.
So I grew up loving the show Beverly Hills 90210 as a kid. There was a girl I liked in high school, and shocker, it wasn't reciprocated, but she invited me over to come watch the show when I was like a junior in high school, and I'd never seen it. And there's this character, Dylan McKay. He's like the coolest dude, and all the guys wanted to be him, and all the girls wanted to be with him. So after that, I was just like kind of an admirer of the actor Luke Perry. So fast forward a number of years, I'm at NASCAR. I know I'm going to leave, and we're doing this project, this World War II thing about a race car owner who served in World War II and won the Purple Heart. So I was like, I think I'll get Luke Perry to narrate this, because I had nothing to lose at this point. And he narrates it. And I remember one of the executives saying, like, why is Luke Perry narrating this? I'm like, oh, his father served in World War II. Complete bullshit. So he narrates it, went well, don't really think much more. It was really cool to work with him. So then about a year later, I'm doing a project for ESPN, and they're looking for a narrator that kind of had, like, for nostalgia purposes, was big in the 90s. So I bring up Luke Perry. I'm like, I just worked with this guy earlier this year. I sent them the show. They're like, oh, he's got a great voice. So now I'm back in front of him, working with Luke again. And he's like, hey, I have an idea. I'd like to do a documentary. I'm like, let's do it. Gives me his number. Now I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Now, like, working with Luke. We wound up doing a documentary together about Marge Schott, this racist baseball owner that was on ESPN. And we just kind of form a friendship. You just meet some people sometimes, you just connect instantaneously. He and I just hit it off, hung out. Every time I was in LA, if he was in town, we'd hang out. And just a great dude. He had me over for Christmas when I was going through a divorce. He invited me over to spend Christmas because I didn't have my kids with me. And I go over to his house. I'm thinking like it's going to be like a Walsh family Christmas. I'm gonna come in, nobody's there, it's just him and his fiance. He's like offering me like day old chili. And I go, Luke, what's going on? And he's going to Bora Bora the next day on vacation. And I go, where is everybody? He goes, oh, no, it's just us. And I said, well, why did you invite me over if we're just hanging out? And he said, well, I remember my first Christmas without my kids, and I didn't want you to be alone. So just a real like heart of gold person. So he started developing the movie Grace Point with me before he passed away, and he was going to play one of the roles in it. So sadly, he passed away. But before he did, he was like, you know, he's like, I'd really like you to meet my friend. This girl that I know, she grew up in my hometown, our families are friends. She just moved to Charlotte. And I was like, all right. I was like, I kind of have a girlfriend. But he's like, yeah, give me your number. And then he's like, okay, I'll have her call you. And she never called, you know. And I'd bring it up to him and he'd be like, I don't know what her deal is. She still didn't call you? And I'm like, nope. And I'm like, he's like, I guess she's just not interested. I said, I guess. So then he passes away, and I get a message on Instagram from this woman, Michelle, saying, hey, Luke talked about you a lot. He really wanted us to meet, and I don't really have anyone to grieve him with in Charlotte. Would you want to get lunch? So we went, we got lunch, and then we wound up going to his funeral memorial together in LA. And we've been together ever since. We got married last year. So that Luke kind of brought us together. And then my movie Grace Point is dedicated to Luke. At the end, it's the last thing on screen. So it was pretty, he's somebody who had a huge impact on my life. Probably as much as anyone in my entire life, he's had an impact.
And that's crazy too, because you said that you went to the girl's house that you liked to watch 90210, and it's like it kind of came full circle.
Yeah.
Because it didn't work out with her, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, it didn't work out when I was 15, but yeah, no, he, you know, I think in life, and this is important for viewers, you should try to gravitate towards people who celebrate you, not just tolerate you. And I think in this industry, sometimes people just are kind of putting up with you, it seems like sometimes. But you will meet people that believe in you. There's only a few that you'll meet. And it doesn't matter what walk of life they're in, but keep them close to you. When Luke was making Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we went out. Like literally, he was filming that day, and we met for dinner. And he was telling me about Quentin Tarantino. And I said, what's it like working with Quentin Tarantino? And I said, what's his best quality? And I thought Luke was going to say he's the best writer, he's got the best dialogue, and he said he's the nicest director I've ever worked with. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. I go, he treats everyone so good on the set. And he would call Luke on his way home and tell him what a great job he did. And I could tell he really made Luke feel great about himself, you know? And I was like, wow, like that is so cool So at Luke's Memorial, I went up to Quentin Tarantino and told him that. I told him that, like Luke said these, and Tarantino was like, thank you for telling, that really means a lot to me. And he really appreciated it. But Luke said to me, he's like, you remind me of Quentin. I'm like, shut the hell up. And he's like, no, he said, the way, your enthusiasm and whatever. And he said to me, he said, I'm gonna be at your movie premiere someday. So he wasn't there, but I felt like he was there in spirit. So it was, and his name was on the screen. So he was somebody that always made me feel like I could make the transition from documentary to scripted. Like, he was never telling me all the reasons why I couldn't do it. He was just telling me all the reasons why I could. So, you know, try to find those people in your life if you can, that motivate you and believe in you.
Chapter 1, Girl Who Fell from the Sky by Stanley M. Brooks.
And that's the true story of Julianne Kepke, who in 1972 was living in Peru, going to the American school. She was 18, was in her senior year. Her parents were noted zoologists. She had lived part of her childhood in the Amazon. Her parents were cataloging butterflies and bats. And then when she got to middle school, they moved her to Lima, and she grew up there, spoke perfect German, perfect English, perfect Spanish. And because it was, they're on a different schedule than us because their seasons are different than us, their school year ends in December. So she was both graduating and going to her prom in December, and her dad wanted them to go to the Amazon on Christmas Eve, and she wanted to stay. And so he went early, and she and her mom stayed behind in Lima, and she went to her prom, graduated with her friends, and then they got on a plane. And when the plane was over the Amazon, it was hit by lightning twice and disintegrated in midair, and she was in the window seat, still strapped in. And as she said, I didn't leave the plane left me. And she found herself at 15,000 feet in her chair, upside down, pinwheeling. And she fell, blacked out, fell, hit the canopy of the Amazon, which broke her fall. It's a miracle. Absolutely, it's the longest free fall without a parachute. And the canopy broke her fall, and she landed in the Amazon, woke up, had nothing but a broken collarbone that she knew of. She had one shoe, lost her glasses, and for the next 9 days followed the river and the lessons that she learned from her father and her own desire not to die, and was rescued. And she's a friend of mine now. She's now in her 50s, and she's an extraordinary woman. She spends half her year in Munich and the other half in the Amazon, just trying to save the rainforest. And we're going to go down to Bogota and the Amazon, and hopefully tell that story at the beginning next year.
Chapter 2, Two Teachers by Bill Duke.
I grew up as a racist. I hated all white people because of slavery and segregation. When I saw my father and mother go through, I just hated white. And I grew up an angry young black man, and I was tall and awkward, and I didn't talk much, and I wrote journals and stuff, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And these two people I'll never forget. Oh, it changed my life. Mrs. Jean Walker, English teacher, very stoic and like this, walking around the class. And she'd tell me 9 times not to write in my journal when she was teaching, and I just ignored her, this racist white woman. And one day, she says, Duke, stay here after class. She said, give me that book. I said, what? The journal, give it to me. I said, I'm not giving you anything. She said, if you don't give me the journal, I'll fail in the class and you can't pass. Threw the journal at her. Pissed off, hated her. Come back to class the next several weeks before spring break and looked at her like, if I could punch you in your damn face, man. Spring break ends, come back to class. End of the first day, I'm going into class. She says, Duke, come here. She gives me back my journal and this book. I said, what is this? She says, the National Poetry Contest book. So what are you giving this to me for? She says, look on page 49. She put 2 of my poems in there and it won. I looked at her. This is somebody I hated. She had read my book, my journal, took the best poems out and submitted them to a national poetry contest, and I won the prize. I was speechless, and she knew I was speechless. She says, there's nothing to say. You're good at what you do. That changed my mind. I wasn't quite sure how to think about race then because that never happened to me. And then I went to Dutchess Community College. And, you know, James Hall was the dean. He was in the Navy and stuff. And I'd gotten a scholarship to Boston University after Dutchess, and I went to, but you know, it was difficult. I got a scholarship for my classes, but I had to work for room and board and food and everything. I was working 7 days a week, exhausted, and my grades weren't that great, and I just gone to the arts college. I decided I was going to come home to Poughkeepsie, and I was going to stay there for a year, quit BU, and get a job, make money, so I can save it for that at IBM. I went during the summer up to visit my friends at BU, and as I'm leaving, Dr. Hall see me. He says, "Hey, Duke, come here." I said, "I got to go, Doc." He says, "Duke, come here, come here." Oh, geez, this guy's a boring ass white man. I can't stand this. I go into his office just to be courteous. He says, "Have a seat." I said, "Okay." "How you doing, Duke?" "I'm okay." "You're going to Boston University, right?" "Yeah, well, I'm not. I'm going, but I'm quitting. I'm staying in Poughkeepsie for a year and going to go back next year." He says, "No, you're not." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes into his vest pocket and hands an envelope to me. I said, "What is this?" He said, "Open it." In the envelope, it was a check of his own money that paid for 3 years of my room and board at Boston University. I looked in this white man's face. I'm supposed to hate. He doesn't say a word. We look at each other. I just said, "Thank you." He did not say a word. He put out his hand and he said, "Don't disappoint me." See, something happens to your racism after that. That's supposed to be your evil enemy that's responsible for the negative in your life and everything. The devil, the system, the creature. Just gave me a check to cover all of my expenses for 3 years. How do you hate that? Life-changing. So I evolved, in my humanity to understand you cannot put a blanket on any of everything, of anything. It's all about the human being, the person, the individual, who they really are behind what their skin color is, behind what their words are, their position. It makes no difference. To know the human. If they respect you, you respect them. Simple. Arab, Chinese, Japanese, Jewish, white, black, green, Hispanic. Those topical services, that's a limited perception. You have the courage to engage people at their level of humanity. You're living. It's easier to dismiss you because I see you and I make assumptions. I learned a long time ago, ASSUME means it makes an ass out of you and an ass out of me, to assume. And I was taught by those two incidents. It was incredible. If it wasn't for those two people, I wouldn't probably be here today. And never asked for anything. All they said is to be your best. That's our reward. It's the truth.
Chapter 3, Thank God They Professionals by Romine Johnson.
I was living, I wasn't doing the show at the time, but I was living on the other side of town, and my dad was sick in the hospital, and my mother, and I actually had my car at that point, and my mother was at the hospital all day. She said, well, you know what, I just don't feel good, you know, being at the house by myself. Can you come over here and spend the night at the house? I said, oh, of course. I had my own apartment. I said, oh, yeah. So she said, well, look, I've been at the hospital all day. I don't have no food. I haven't cooked. Maybe you ought to stop at McDonald's or something and get you something. I said, oh, okay. And I stopped at the McDonald's. I went through the drive-thru. It was kind of late at night. And I ordered my food, and the girl said, well, can you pull over because, you know, we'll cook it and bring it out to you. I said, okay. So I'm sitting in the car, and it's cold, and I'm running my gas. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. So I said, well, I'm going to go inside. So I came inside, and she looked. I said, I'm the guy you told to pull over. She said, oh, okay. So they said, we haven't even got it ready yet. So I'm standing at the counter, and it was like four of us, four guys at the counter, you know, getting our food. And the little boy in front of me, you know, the little McDonald's boy, he's like looking at me, and all of a sudden, he looks over like this, and he starts doing this. And I'm looking at him like, what look you got? I'm looking at him like, what? He said, and I look over, the guy got a sawed-off shotgun pointed right at my head. And he's telling me, raise your hands, motherfucker. And my hands up. And these guys proceeded to rob the McDonald's. And what he did was, it was two. One guy came in on the other side, the other door, the backup guy. And he uses me as a shield. Oh. And he got the gun under my arm, like my arm's up, he puts the gun under here, and he's got the gun right in the face of that little boy.
Oh, wow.
And he says, empty the register. And the little boy naturally, he said, empty the register. So the manager, a female at this time, she's down here, and the guy with the sawed off, he says, okay, empty all the registers. She empties all the registers except mine. And then he said, okay, open the safe. And she says, well, I can't, I don't have a combination, it's a drop box. She said, no, you can open the safe. She said, I can't open it. They come every night and get the money. The security come every night and get the money. I can't open it. He said, you lying. He says, get down on the ground, bitch. She gets down on the ground, on the floor of the place, and he leans over the counter, and he cocks the gun, and he puts it on the side of his head. He says, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna ask you one last time, open the safe. So she's like this, and she's like, she starts crying. Please don't kill me. I can't open the safe. I got a baby at home. Please, it's just me and my baby. Please, please. And I'm like this, and I'm just looking, and I'm just like, oh my God. And I got the guy behind me with the little boy like this, and I'm like this, and I'm like, oh, and I'm like this. And all of a sudden, the guy uncocks the gun. And the next thing on my mind is, thank God. They professionals. Professionals don't want to shoot anybody. See, I found that out from being in Detroit around the hood. Professionals don't want to shoot anybody. They want to get in and get out. So he says, okay, we're finished getting the money. She jumps up, she gets the money, she gets down to my register, little boy, this McDonald's money. And we say, give him the money, give him the money. We yelling and screaming, and they say, shut up. We didn't shut up, give him the money, give him the money. It was just pandemonium. So this manager, she knocks him out the way, goes in his register and get the money and put it in one of the big McDonald's bags and hand it to the guy. So the first guy out of the place is the guy that had the pistol under my arm. The last guy out, he says, anybody try anything, I'm gonna come back and kill everybody. He comes down the line of us. They didn't even rob us. He comes down the line of us and takes the gun across all our backs, the small of my back. I had this gun go down the small of my back, and I'm telling you, my life flashed before my eyes. When people say, oh, my life flashed, I went from being a baby shitting in my pants, in my diaper, all the way up to the, it was just like that. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, oh God, oh, like this. And he left out. When he left out, they took off running. I looked, they took off running. All of the customers jumped over the counter, and we was all behind the thing. By this time, the cops came in because they pushed the silent alarm. And I got to the house, and my mother said, oh, she said, you didn't get your food? I'm like, no, I didn't get it. So she says, what's wrong? I said, we got stuck up at McDonald's. My mother's like, oh, okay. My mother got mad at me when I said, I have to remember what that felt like, because one day I'm gonna have to act and have to recreate that experience. My mother got mad at me. That was the end of that story, but that's what happened. My mother said, what? You in that damn acting? And that's when I really finally realized this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be.
Chapter 4, Prince's Principles by Alex Munoz.
I moved to Los Angeles before I got accepted to film school, and I just figured if I don't get into USC or UCLA or AFI, I'll, go assistant director or get a job at a production company or with a studio. So the second day I was in LA, I got an internship with a company called Propaganda Films. And on my second day of the job, a casting director says, hey, what's your name? And I said, Alex. She said, oh, her name is Lisa Fields. And she said, would you like to be a stand-in for a famous rock star? I'm like, well, who is it? And she said, well, I can't tell you. I said, nah, I don't want to be a stand-in because I want to be behind the camera. So I went back to my boss, Stephen Price, and I said, hey, Lisa Fields wants me to be a stand-in for a rock star. She won't tell me who it is, and I don't want to do it. And he said, why? I said, because I want to be a director. I don't want to be in front of the camera. I want to be behind the camera. He said, you have to do it. You've never been on a professional film set. So I raced back, and she was on the phone ready to hire somebody. I said, I'll do it. She said, okay. So the next day, I'm on the set, and the DP says, okay, Alex, you can leave now. And I turn around, and I'm face to face with Prince. And I'm like, I really wasn't a big Prince fan at the time, but I was looking down at him, and our noses were like this far apart. I'm like, wow, you got 4-inch heels on and I'm taller than you. And he just laughed and he goes, can we switch places? And I said, sure. So anyway, we were told not to talk to Prince. They said, do not talk to him, but he would talk to me. And on day 6, I got my letter of acceptance from USC. And my roommate got the letter, and she said, I have something really important to give you. I said, okay, well, I'm in downtown LA and I'm on this music video shoot. Can you bring it? So she gave me the letter. I opened it up and I went into the set, and I said, I was really excited. I said, I got into USC Film School. And everyone started clapping. And Prince said, I'm like, what? He goes, come here. I'm like, well, what did I do? So he said, so you're going to be a filmmaker? I said, yes. He said, let me hear you say that. I said, say what? He said, let me hear you say you're going to be a filmmaker. And I said, I'm going to be a filmmaker. And he said, I want you to listen closely. There are 4 rules I want you to consider abiding by if you are going to pursue filmmaking in this town. I said, okay. So he said, first one, he pointed up, always remember God, the creator. Always remember God and your creator. Number 2, always remember where you come from, because when you forget where you come from, you die as an artist. And then number 3 was break the rules. If you follow the rules, you're going to be boring and you're going to fade fast. And number 4 was always give back. You must give back as an artist. And I said, okay. And he said, repeat what I said, and I did. I call these my 4 purple cornerstones. Remember God, where you come from. Never forget where you come from. I'm sorry, let me start over. I will always remember the 4, I call them my 4 purple cornerstones. Remember God and the Creator. Never forget where you come from. Break the rules, and always, always give back. And he said, grace is really important in your journey. So after he tested me on the 4, core principles, he told Rosie Gaines, his backup singer, he said, Rosie, pray for this brother that he does not go down the dark path. He needs to stay on the path of light. So Rosie Gaines took my hands, placed them on Prince's piano, and made a prayer of protection that I wouldn't be seduced by the dark side, all what Prince called the fleshly temptations. And she said, this is serious. We are praying for you. And after she prayed, Prince said, amen. Wow. And he said, don't forget what I told you. I said, I won't. So imagine that is a priceless encounter that cannot be measured. I just moved to LA. I finished my undergraduate work at Santa Barbara. For him to take the time to tell me these things and share with me his 4 core principles, and for him to ask his backup singer, Rosie Gaines, to pray for me, I never forget this. And one of the reasons why, when I decided to move forward with making FYI Films a nonprofit, I rummaged through my mind. I remember Prince saying, always give back. And he helped me. I don't think I'd be talking about FYI Films if Prince didn't tell me this about giving back. The second part of the story is, so when Prince died, right, they did a tribute concert for him. And I called the organizers and I said, hi, my name is Alex Munoz. Prince gave me some really good advice back in the day. I will do anything. I will sweep the streets. I will sell popcorn. I will sell hot dogs. I will be an usher. I'll do security. I just want to, in my own way, pay tribute to this great artist, because he gave me some advice that I'll never, ever forget. So they said, we'll call you right back. And what happened was, 2 hours later, they called back and they said, we Googled you and you're a filmmaker. Why don't you do a film celebrating Prince? And I said, well, the concert's 10 days away. I can't possibly make a good enough film. And I said, how about if I document it? So I went to document this Prince tribute concert. And the very first interview I did happened to be in the same exact spot when Prince told me the 4 purple cornerstones. It was like, oh my God, this is where Prince told me to remember God, remember where you come from, break the rules, and always give back. And I felt really inspired. Like my body was like trembling, because you could feel his presence in that area. It was the concert was right in front of LA City Hall, which is where they shot the video. How uncanny is that? Then I went out to the audience and interviewed some people about the concert, and Stevie Wonder does this amazing rendition of Purple Rain. So I'm trying to get backstage to interview Stevie, and I can't get to him. And the guards are saying, you can't talk to Stevie, he doesn't want to be bothered. So one of my FY Film alumni from Hawaii, Adrian Kelly, sees me and says, hey, Alex, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I think I told you when I taught FY Films, that when I taught the film workshop, that my first experience on a film set was being Prince's stand-in. He said, yeah, but what are you doing here? I said, I'm doing a documentary. He said, well, why do you look mad? I said, because Stevie gave the best performance and I want to interview him and they won't let me get backstage. And he said, oh, I could help you. And I said, Adrian, that's really nice of you, but you can't help me. He said, Alex, I could help you. He goes in the back, comes back, and he says, come on. He takes me to Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder's nephew.
Oh, wow.
So, wow. I felt like it was full circle. So, I mean, I got like chicken skin right now because Prince tells me the importance of giving back. I'm there to do a documentary about this concert. I can't get to Stevie. Turns out one of my alumni never told me he was Stevie Wonder's nephew. Gets me backstage because I believe I had access to Stevie and all of Prince's backup singers and all of Prince's backup dancers. Because if I didn't teach that FYI film workshop in Hawaii, I would have met Adrian. And then 2 years later, I see Adrian at this concert and he gets me backstage. That's karma. That is, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I told Adrian, I said, why didn't you ever tell me you were Stevie Wonder's nephew? He said, I don't know, Munoz, I don't want people, my family, we don't want people to like us just because we're related to Stevie. So we just, but you earned it because you've come to our birthday parties and our 4th of July parties and you never asked any questions and you showed us love anyway. So, okay, now you know. So, I mean, what a blessing, right? That
Oh my gosh.
one of
what a
my
story.
alumni is Stevie Wonder's nephew, and little did I know that 2.5 years later, I would need him to complete my doc.
Right, and you're in the same spot where
Yeah.
you first met Prince. So
Yes.
it was a music video back
Yes.
in the day
Yes.
in front of LA City Hall?
Yeah.
Chapter 5 The Cat House by Jack Perez.
We had a feral cat. We've always had feral cats come to our house because we have lots of cats. And a feral cat, a wild cat, will just sense that cat people live there. And a feral cat obviously cannot be pet or touched or anything. They're wild animals. But we've done this over the years and we've fed feral cats. So, I guess it's a little bit over 10 years ago, we were moving from our apartment. And just as we were about to move, a feral cat showed up and was like, feed me. And we were like, yes, of course we'll feed you. But we're moving. And we were faced suddenly with this prospect of like, what are we going to do? This animal is like dependent upon us now, but we're moving. It got to the point where I was like literally driving across town every day to leave food. It's this empty house. The cat was standing there. It was the saddest thing. He's like, where's my food? I'm like, I'm driving across town. I can't keep this up. I can't expect the new tenants to take care of him or whatever. So I started looking into rescues and looking into that whole world. And it's again, I became educated. I was like, wow, there's just tons of kill shelters. If you bring an animal to a regular shelter, likely they will be killed. Certainly a feral who can never be adopted, rarely. What do you do with a feral cat? And so after a lot of research, I found this one place, which I'd never heard of, the Cat House on the Kings, which was this one woman's massive property up near Fresno that she had turned in this ranch-style, multi-acre property into this sanctuary, an adoption center, where she had, almost 1,000 animals that were totally cared for. It wasn't a hoarder. It was like an operation.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And she was like, yeah, we actually have a feral, section. And if you can catch him, you can bring him here. Wow. And I was like, wow. And where everybody else was like, we're full up and they'll kill him and all, this was the one place. And when I went up there, it was like one woman and a couple of, maybe one other person and all of these animals. And I was like, this was like the definition to me of like a saint. Like this was like this woman who had dedicated her whole life to these animals, literally, and was like making it work. She definitely needed help. But, I said to myself, my God, well, what can I do in exchange for this? You saved this cat's life and these thousands of other dogs and cats. So I decided to make this YouTube video. I said, I'll come back and I'll do a portrait of you and the place, a couple of minutes, and, we'll put it on YouTube. And this is when YouTube was sort of new, and we just, as luck would have it, there were enough cat people out there that it started to go viral. And people really saw that this was this beautiful soul that was doing something so unique. And she started to get donations and it started to get more well known. And now, 10, 13 years later, it's considered, it's a very well known institution, around the world. People come from all over the world to visit this place and support it. My wife has said, it's the most important film you ever made, was that film for the Cat House, because talking about direct action, that film, because it went viral, because I made it, because it exists, and it reached people, that institution, that sanctuary received much needed donations that saved a lot more animals. And so in terms of doing something that's valuable, truly valuable, that little film when I think about it, is definitely up there as being an important movie of mine, just because it ultimately helped a lot of animals.
Chapter 6, Station Fire by Andy Radzewski.
Do you still have the mini DV tapes
No,
collecting dust somewhere?
unfortunately, it's a bummer. Let's see, this would have been 11 years ago, my house that was renting burned down in one of the LA, at the time, the biggest fire in LA, and I lost all of my films, I lost all my writing, all my art. I used to, draw, and it still kind of stings, but truthfully, it was a big reset button. It has helped me with attachment and having a lack of it. It was the year after my house burned down. I just kind of lived on the road for a year. I could fit everything I owned in a backpack, and so I slept on couches. I flew out to Hawaii and slept on my buddy's hotel room while we were working on a movie out there. My life was a bit of an adventure, which I think was good. I think it was an interesting life for a time, but at the sacrifice of losing, basically everything I had created up until 30 years old, essentially.
Was this the station fire?
Yeah, the station
Yes.
fire. Yeah.
I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a strange time. Strange time. It's funny to think that that's so long ago, because it does feel so relevant to my life. Like, it really, it's altered some of my way of approaching things, and purchases feel strange to me still. Furniture and owning things still feels a little weird, a little PTSD, I think. But my life has been good since then. So I just one of the stepping stones, I guess. Who knows?
Aside from you losing all these things and that being the horrible negative side and losing, in a sense, your parts of yourself really went down in that fire.
Yeah.
Do you think it showed you how temporary things are, and you looked at things in a new light, in a positive way that way?
Yeah, I would for sure say the silver lining of losing everything is that the idea of impermanence becomes a lot easier to grasp. And I for sure, it's the impermanence of everything, life, health, friendships, you just never, I think I take some of those things less for granted now, perhaps, I hope, I don't know. And I do wonder, 20 years from now, what will the scars of that look like? Will they still be there? Will I don't know. I moved into a house a year ago after living in someone else's house for basically 10 years. I had a wing of a house to myself. And when I moved into my place last year, I owned nothing. I had no bed. I didn't have a chair, a desk. I had nothing. And so 10 years, I guess, at the time after the fire was the first time that I was like, okay, I got to purchase some things. And it still feels odd. I can feel the weight of those things. I liked the idea that any particular morning, not to say I would do this necessarily, but that I could just kind of pack up everything into my car and be on my way. And that's everything. It's all I need. So yeah, I don't know. So it's strange. I think I'm still processing all of it, in terms of its ultimate lessons.
No, things do own you. It's true, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have a weight for sure. Yeah.
Chapter 7, Last Moments by Adisa.
10 years ago, I went to Sierra Leone with Isaiah Washington on a documentary film shoot. And on that shoot literally would change my life. Not only did I get exposed to Sierra Leone and the conditions over there, because they had just undergone a civil war, and Isaiah was looking up his roots, and I was part of the documentary team. I had a great experience. But when I came back, I had a near-death experience because I had caught a virus over there called the hantavirus. And when I got back to LA, I was just fatally ill, and I had to be rushed to the hospital. I was in the ICU, and my heart stopped beating 3 times. I had multiple organ failure, and I was in really bad shape. And the doctors didn't think I was going to make it. Nobody thought I was going to make it. So my mother at that time flew up here, and people were just praying. I mean, I was just in critical condition, and but miraculously, I made it through. Yeah, I made it through.
Did they know what it was?
They didn't at the time. They didn't. And it was a good thing that I was at what they called, I was at Daniel Freeman Memorial Hospital, and they were like, oh, thank God you didn't go to like Cedars-Sinai. Because the Daniel Freeman Hospital, they could bring in other technicians from everywhere. Like they could bring in people from UCLA, they could bring in doctors from USC to help on my case. Right, whereas I've been at Cedars, they have like clear rules about Cedars-Sinai doctors working there, and you can't bring others in. But because I was at Daniel Freeman Hospital, they were able to bring in other doctors. So nobody knew what I had. All I knew was I had multiple organ failure and my body was shutting down. And this one particular doctor stayed with me, and he had to restart my heart 3 times in the middle of the night. And so, yeah, no, it looked like I was on my deathbed. It looked like I was on my deathbed. And actually, I thought I was on my deathbed too. The only thing kept me going was the fact that, because at one point I remember myself making sort of this resolve that, like, you know what, if I'm gonna die, my last moments were in Africa. My last moments were playing with children. My last moments were with, like, you know, having fun and sharing of my gifts with everybody, because that's what I was doing in Africa, giving out soccer balls, and I had made some nice relationships over there. So I said, you know what, if I gotta go, then so be it. I had made peace with it, you know, and but it was another plan for me. It was another plan. I'm here.
And how long were you in the hospital?
I was there for about, I was probably there for about 7 to 8 weeks total, but for like 3 weeks I was sedated, and I was under heavy sedation as the doctors treated me and put me on dialysis, and we just, you know, trying everything to fix me, trying everything to make me better, but nothing worked, and they didn't know. So they said they just had to let it run its course and just let me be, you know, just let me be, and sort of let my body fight it. When I got back and I had gotten well, I shocked everybody because I told my mother I wanted to go back to Africa. And she was like, oh no, you can't go back to Africa. Oh no, you're not gonna do that to me again. My mother was beside herself. My father, everybody tripped out. I mean, they were like, no, you can't go back. Because I got an opportunity to go back with, was it Regina King? Yeah, Regina King, the actress, had invited me to go back and work with her on her documentary. And so they were like, no, you can't go back, you can't go back, especially if you're going back to Sierra Leone, the same place. And so people were freaking out, like freaking out. And but I was resolved. I was like, you know what? I'm better. I can do this. And I wanted to do this. I wanted to be, there was some things that had happened to me by being sick, you know, like I was having revelations around my life and what I wanted to do with my life and how I wanted to show up. And so, yeah, and going back to Africa was part of it. I think the light had turned on more. I'm not gonna say it was completely different. I mean, I was already like a very positive, optimistic person, wanting to do things, but I was probably stopping myself, like the tournament in Africa and working with the kids. I never thought I could do that. You know, like there was something about the way I was living life that I felt like that was larger than what I could do, right? And so I started to, so yes, to answer your question, once I got better, I started to test the boundaries more, like around greatness and largeness and saying that I can do it. I can do that, why not, right? And so, yeah, in that way. And then having to experience death also, I mean, it just gives you this sense of, I'm not saying immortality, but to experience and be that close to death and to know that it can be snapped away from you at an instant, it kind of sharpened my focus about living life in the present, moment to moment, and doing as much as I can in that moment.
Chapter 8, Amy Purdy's Journey by Barbara Seymour Giordano.
Essentially, Amy's story is that at 19, she contracted meningitis and she died essentially and then was brought back. But she'd gone to the hospital. She was so advanced in it that the body tries to save the organs and the blood rushes from it. So rushes from the vital organs, and your hands turn purple, her feet turn purple, her cheeks and nose. And when that happens, it's like frostbite. And so when they got her to the hospital, it was touch and go. She actually did pass away very briefly, and they brought her back. But it was touch and go for a long, long time. And then in the end, they had to amputate her legs from the ankles down, or the calves down, and both of them. But everything else was saved. I mean, she did have a lot of other, she lost hearing in her ear, she had all of these issues. So here she was, this story, and she'd done a lot already at this point. You know, she had been in a Madonna video and she'd done all these things, but I had to, because she'd done so many things, I had to weigh and measure what was important in the story. And that's where I had to trust my intuition, and where I could actually look at this guide of the hero's journey, because her life story, this particular incident, fit perfectly in it. So it isn't a life story. It's not an autobiography. It's a moment in time. And a great speech is. It doesn't try to cover too much. It's a very narrow subject. And this narrow subject for Amy was her life, this life where she had to let go of the old Amy to embrace the new Amy. And we wrote that in there. And every time she goes, every time I say that line, I cry. And I was like, good, yay. But that was the middle part of the hero's journey, the very point where she then begins to embrace the journey that she's on. So even though you go over the threshold, right, you go through the steps of, and I can't remember all of them, but there's that low point in the circle, right? And that's where she began to rise like a phoenix from the ashes. And she began to bring back what she learned, of course, to cross it back over and bring the elixir back to the world, which was a speech. So it was really about her experience and what she learned and the struggles that she went through and how hard it was, but yet how she wouldn't change a thing, right? And so I had to figure out, do we keep the Madonna video part in there? Because my speakers use slides, right? The majority, I think I've only worked with a couple who have not. In high resolution photos, I don't, occasionally I let them use text if it's important to the story. But the images are wallpaper that really helps the emotion stick. So the story will be stickier if the resolutions and the photos of the resolution of the photos are super emotional, the photos themselves. And she had a lot of emotional photos. And so we chose the most important parts of the story. So we had to take them, the audience low, to the lowest point to bring them back up again in the journey where she was resurrected.
So she does the TED Talk, and then what's the response within what amount of time?
So this is so exciting because it's a TEDx talk, right? So this is 2011, and she's like, okay, I did the talk. It's been posted. It took like a month before they posted it. Great. And this was probably, so we did it in May. It probably went up in June. Crickets. Giddy, giddy, giddy. She got about 20,000 hits and through December. And then I think it was in December, all of a sudden she calls me like completely worked up. Oh my God, Barbara, what? She goes, go look at the TED Talk. They had taken the TEDx talk and put it on the TED page.
Oh.
And they don't do that anymore, but they did it for her. And so that's where you can see it, is on the TED page. They put it on the TED page. And once that happened, it went viral. Wow. And she's like, people are writing in Arabic. Like a month later, it just started going everywhere. And we were watching it tick through, like, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 by the hour. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. And yeah, so she just captured the hearts and minds of so many people, her story. And it's a remarkable story. And she's a remarkable woman. Just a really beautiful on the outside, but equally as beautiful on the inside.
Chapter 9, Instinct by Walid Azami.
I work with Madonna, and I worked on her world tour, and I befriended a friend of mine, now a really good friend, Jamie King, who's her creative director of the tour, and like so many other artists. And so just glaze over that real fast. So he would watch me come in and look at everything, like everything. I would like inspect like crazy, because I knew where I was. I knew that I'm gonna learn so much from this woman. And I left that job, and I left that job, and out of the blue, he just texted me one day. He's like, "Hey, Waleed, how are you? Let's go get dinner. I want to know what you're up to." And so I went to dinner with him, and I drove up from Anaheim I think, no, I was in Anaheim or Fullerton, one of those two cities in Orange County at the time. And I drove up to LA, and I met him for dinner. But what he did not know is that I was dead broke. Broke, okay? And this is pretty much right at the birth of the 2008 Great Recession. So I had quit being a music video director's assistant. I had done some PA jobs. I was the worst PA you could ever hire on. I mean, the amount of effort I put into not looking busy, it was exhausting. And I thought, just do the work, you know, but like trying to walk back and forth and like look busy without really doing the stuff. So Jamie had called me. He's like, "I want to know what you're up to." And he had a plan. So we went up and had dinner. And another friend, Dago, who's a very talented director, joined us also. And he asked me, "What are you doing?" Now, I'm broke at this time. I have a credit card, and I probably have like $300-400 in my savings, and that was it, because you don't get paid much as an assistant in Hollywood, you know? And so, and I had quit that to try to do some behind-the-scenes video, like MTV's making the video. And I got 1 or 2 jobs, and then it just stopped. But I didn't know that the recession was born, you know? And so I had stopped for everyone, but people hadn't been honest about it yet, that something happened overnight, right? And so I went to dinner with them, and they were asking me like, "So what are you doing?" And I would say, "Well, I want to," and he's like, "Shut up." And I thought, what? And I said, and I was so confused because I thought, hey, you're asking me what I'm doing or what I want to do, and I'm telling you, and you're telling me to shut up. And we did this a few times back and forth, and he said, "Don't talk again until you're actually doing it." Because trying is lying. And I don't know if he actually said trying is lying or if I picked that up somewhere else, but the meaning is the same. Trying is lying. So you're doing it or you're lying to yourself, but you're not lying to me. Right? And he was really rough with me. So he broke me that night, and he rebuilt me that night. And he gave me one of the best lessons I've ever learned in my life. I actually practiced it without really knowing what it was. And he gave me this thing I'm going to tell you right now. And he said, no matter what country you're from, no matter what faith you practice or you don't practice, gender, national, anything, doesn't matter what socioeconomic level, one of the first things that any human being learns, one of the first words is no. Because we are told no so many times. And he said it's not the hearing no that's bad. It's why we're telling people no. No, I don't want people to think you're a bad baby. I don't want people to think that I'm a bad mother. I don't want, be a good little girl and be quiet, right? Be a good boy. Don't show your emotions. Be tough. And so we are the only living creatures on this planet that teach our children to kill their instincts. And so we're sending people out there to conform, and you have to a certain extent, not to be a freak in society, right? But we're sending people out there, and we're taking away their greatest tool, that fight or flight, And so he said, if your instincts tell you to do something, go do it. I don't care if you think you're going to look like a fool. If your instincts tell you, don't get in this car right now, don't get in that car. Let everyone think you're crazy. But that is a direct phone call from you to God or Allah or energy or the universe or whatever you want to think is bigger than you. Okay, a greater power. And he said, that's a direct phone call that you're getting at any moment. So he gave me examples. He said, how many times have you thought about somebody and then they text you? And you're like, that's so weird. I was thinking about you. It's like, that's a connection. How many times has a mother been at work and she's like, something is wrong. Something is wrong with my baby. And they call the babysitter and like, yeah, there was a small accident. He or she is fine. That mother knows there's a connection, right? And so he said, the closest you'll ever be to God, or again, whatever, I don't want people getting lost on that part of it, or whatever higher power, Mother Nature, is when you listen to your instincts. And he's like, if you want to photograph everybody in all green paint, Go do it. Something is telling you this is going to be good for your career. Now, that night, so that's what I mean by he broke me and then he rebuilt me. And he was setting in an infrastructure that I had already been using and how I've acted in a lot in my earlier career, in my school and everything. Sorry. That's okay. And so he had set like the structure, the infrastructure of like things that a guideline. And I had been doing it, but I didn't know this was my instincts, okay? And I went home. Thank God he paid for dinner because I did not have money to even pay for my portions. And we had like drinks and dessert and appetizers. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, this is expensive. And he set me on my way. And for like a week after, I had this weird feeling, apparently it was my instincts, but this weird foreign feeling that I should buy a camera. But I didn't, like, when I tell you, I did not even know that a camera, you can detach a lens from a camera. Like a DSLR, I guess mirrorless now, whatever. I did not even know you could do that. I didn't know what an ISO was. I knew nothing about a camera. And so, but I had this feeling, go buy a camera. Jobs are not coming in. Rent is coming up. And I only have a few $100 and a credit card left. And I sat on it and I pushed it down. And it just kept persisting for, I want to say a week and a half or something like that. This feeling was there and it would not go away. And I don't know what made me, but I decided to listen to my instincts. And I went into a camera shop and I'm so naive, but I went in and I said, hi, hi, I have $2,000 on my credit card. And I said, I have $2,000 and I want to be a photographer. And he sold me like $1,998 and whatever. There was nothing else left in the store to buy, not even AA batteries, because it was like, they maxed out my card. And I bought a 40D, which is not even a real, it was like a prosumer camera. And it was a good camera, but I'm just saying it wasn't like, it was whatever. It was like a Rebel today or something. And I sat in my car and I remember the most nauseous feeling. And I thought, what did I do? Now I can't even get a cash advance on my last credit card because I maxed that sucker out. I went home and I was a mess. And what a dramatic person, but I was a mess, you know, and I thought, man, I don't even know how to turn this thing on. Like, no joke, I have no idea how to turn this thing. I didn't know a single thing, okay? But I started shooting things like leaves on a tree and a trail of ants, and it was all horrible pictures. I got a call because I wanted to do behind the scenes video. And I got a call because of a friend of a friend of a friend. And they were like, hi, is Walid there? I'm like, right? And I was like, yes.
What are you selling me?
Stranger, exactly. And they said, hey, somebody said you have a video camera. And at the time, it was like the mini DV tapes. So they were like, hey, I heard you have an HD camera. And because everyone was using the Panasonic DVX100, which was like not fully HD, I think, whatever. But I said yes, and I was so excited because I can buy food now, okay? And put food in the fridge. And they said, Usher needs somebody to come to the Kodak Theater right now. And I'm packing everything in a bag, throwing everything. Didn't even have camera bags, like I put them in a gym bag and stuff. And I'm about to close the door. And that weird feeling in my gut said, Usher doesn't know why you're hired. It's his manager. Go get that stupid camera you just bought too, the still camera. And I grabbed it and I ran in the car. And I remember I had a little BlackBerry Curve with the ball. And I wrote, f-stop means this. ISO means this. And, you know, aperture means this, whatever. And that was pretty much our shutter speed. And I went there, I went underground like 2-3 levels. I said hi to Usher. And I'm one of those people that when I'm nervous, I look like I'm hiding a bomb. I'm telling you, it's like this. It just looks so bad, you know? And I don't have a poker face whatsoever. And I was just shooting stuff, and I decided to put the video camera on a tripod in the corner. So now it looks like a security camera, but Usher has the footage, and I wish I had it, but of me trying to figure this out and looking at my BlackBerry, I'm like, okay, this button did this, and I'll take pictures. And I didn't even know that I had a 1 gigabyte card, CF card. So my compact flash was one, and I was shooting on JPEG small. Did not even know about these settings, that they existed, or that RAW was such a thing, okay? And I'm shooting machine gun style because I'm banking on quantity here, not quality. And pictures are like, because they had the neon tubes, pictures are coming out like all different colors, but it is not the color you want to see. And Usher's coming out blurry because I'm apparently on like not even at 40. I think it was I pretty much almost had the bold button, you know, it was just dragging the shutter. Everything was blurry. And I'm ramping up the ISO as high as possible. I'm just hitting any button, okay? And Usher looks at me and says, "What f-stop are you using?" And yo, when I tell you I have mastered how to die on the inside and keep a calm face, I think I'm keeping a calm face. That gut feeling said, walk away. Yo, I was on autopilot. I don't think that was Walid that day, okay? I was on autopilot. That gut feeling said, walk away. And I remember it was instant, and it said, it's better that he thinks you're a crazy artist than someone who has no idea, which was the truth, okay? And actually, now I think both are true. But I went upstairs. I looked up again, because I wrote f-stop, but I had to look up. I'm like, what did this mean? You know, with all these performers, street performers, and I'm like, come on, Verizon, you know, like give me the reception and everything. And I went back down in case he asked me, and I wrote it down, because I'd be like, f-stop is this. I'm like, I am using 5.6, you know, but he didn't ask me again, and I just kept shooting. I went home and sewed down, and I looked at all the pictures, and I did not even know that Photoshop exists. I did not know Photoshop was a thing. The whole institute of Adobe was not even in my spectrum whatsoever, okay? So I decided to download all the pictures, open them up individually inside the preview, like what you would open up a PDF in. And so you have the option of bringing down contrast, exposure, saturation, hue, and that's about it. And I'm looking at these pictures, I'm like, I don't know where Usher is because everything is blurry. I can't tell, you know, anything. And out of that, I probably pulled under 10 images that you can identify it was Usher and that he was actually in focus on accident, okay? And I pulled up about 10 of them. And this is me opening a picture one at a time. I'm like, no, next. It was a disaster, okay? And then it was like, I did not even know such a thing of Lightroom existed. So I would take them in one folder, copy them, paste them into a second folder as I'm eliminating which pictures I want, you know, and narrowing down. And I found about 10, 12, maybe 9, I don't know. But I opened them up in that preview panel, and I thought, oh my God, they're every color under the rainbow. And I remember again that instinct was really in play, and it was like, just turn it all black and white. And I desaturated all of them, and I boosted the contrast a little bit. They were already blurry sometimes, and they were already high ISO, so super grainy. And I sent them to Benny Medina, who was Usher's manager at the time. Now he does J-Lo and I think J-Lo only. And they called me within like 30 minutes. And they said, Walid, I don't know how you guessed it, but we sent the pictures to Usher. And his whole new thing for the new album is old Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
And he wants these black and white, grainy, imperfect images. And so we want to know, would you be willing to work with him and be his personal photographer?
Oh my gosh.
And that to me is like, that's the perfect story in my career of following your instincts and just having faith in it. I mean, I know that people are listening to this and they're like, he's crazy. Like, how am I going to take that chance? But that was me just following instincts from the start. and going, there's this weird feeling and I don't know what's going on. I'm going to follow it. And every single day, I would learn one new thing on YouTube. And I would type things like, what does exposure mean? And I would study it. Because I'm a history major, you know, ask me about the Civil War, I'll tell you everything about it, you know, but, and I would learn that one thing. And then I was not allowed to go to bed until I learned one new thing every single day. So after a week, it was no big deal. After a month, it was no big deal. By the end of the second month, it started adding up, the things that I knew, you know? And so Usher would say, hey, let's shoot over there. I'm like, no, let's not, because I hadn't even reached that yet. I was just on natural window light, you know? And I was like, no, that's not, let's just stand over here and do it. And I would just, so whatever I learned the night before, I would practice it on him the next day. And he's like, you have such a vast style. Like, you do so many things. I'm like, dude, you don't even know. Like, I'm on YouTube every night, like learning things and then coming downstairs and practicing it on you. And I learned how to photograph on tour with Usher.